I flew in without telling anyone, expecting a surprise hug from my daughter. Instead, I was led into an ICU room where machines were keeping her alive, and I learned she'd been fighting alone for weeks. While she lay there, her husband was posting yacht photos funded by my money. I didn't confront him. I made one silent move, and minutes later, his world began to collapse. Before I tell you how a surprise visit turned into the most decisive turning point of my life, do me a small favor. Subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It helps these stories reach people who might need them more than they realize. My name is Caleb Turner. I'm a retired systems engineer from a quiet town in Westfield, Colorado, and 3 years ago I lost my wife, Eleanor. Since then, the world had felt muted, as if someone had turned the volume down on everything that mattered. The only color left in my days came from a photograph I carried in my wallet. My daughter Lena, laughing in her kitchen, flower on her hair. My granddaughter Sophie missing her front tooth in a crooked grin. And my grandson Noah holding up a crayon drawing like it was the Mona Lisa. 3 years. Too long. As the plane began its descent into Pacific City International Airport, my fingers hovered over my phone. I typed, "Landing in 20 minutes. Can't wait to see you." I didn't hit send. I wanted the look on her face when I showed up unannounced. I wanted hugs, laughter, a real reunion, not another grainy video call. During our last conversation, 3 months earlier, Lena had sounded off. "I'm just tired, Dad," she'd said. Really tired. At the time, I blamed life. 2 kids, work deadlines, stress. I didn't push. I should have. The terminal buzz with families reuniting. Children running. Parents crying. Suitcases forgotten in excitement. I watched it all with a smile, imagining Lena stepping into my arms. I grabbed my overnight bag and ordered a rideshare. "Northwood Hills, please," I told the driver. "I'm surprised at my daughter." "Best kind of visit," he said with a grin. Family never forgets those. The city rolled past a window. Sunlit streets, palm trees, blue sky that felt almost mocking in its calm. Lena had always loved big places. Places that promised more than the small-town life her mother and I had built. Eleanor used to say Lena got that restlessness from me, back when I still believed risks always paid off. I tried calling Lena once during the drive. I hung up before it rang. No, in person. Always better in person. The car pulled up to a neat house with pale siding and trimmed hedges. The kind of place that looked like stability. I paid the driver, stepped onto the sidewalk, and reached in my bag for the gift I'd made myself. A small wooden keepsake box, hand-carved, sanded smooth. Inside, I planned to place Eleanor's ring one day, for Sophie when she was old enough. I walked to the door and rang the bell. Nothing. I rang it again, longer this time. The chime echoed through the house and died into silence. "Lena?" I called, knocking gently. "It's Dad." No footsteps. No voices. No kids shouting from the back. I stepped back and really looked for the first time. The flower beds were dry, petals scattered across the walkway. The mailbox sagged under the weight of envelopes and small packages, some bleached by the sun. I picked one up, an electric bill dated weeks ago. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine. I walked around the side gate and peered into the backyard. Patio chairs sat unused, coated in dust. The little vegetable patch Lena once bragged about was nothing but brittle stems. A child scooter lay tipped over near the back door. One was still spinning lazily in the breeze. Something was wrong. I returned to the porch and sat down slowly, the keepsake box heavy in my hands now. That engineer's instinct kicked in. When things don't add up, gather data. Don't panic. A neighbor stepped out next door, pruning shears in hand. "You looking for Parkers?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm Lena's father. Have you seen them?" She hesitated. "Not lately. Been awful quiet. Kids are usually outside by now." My stomach tightened. "They're probably away," I said, though my voice didn't believe it. "Vacation, maybe." She nodded politely, unconvinced, and went back to her yard. I checked my phone again. Lena's social media, silent. The last post was over a month old. No photos. No updates. That wasn't her. I called her number. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. On the third attempt, I let it ring longer. Then, hello. The voice wasn't my daughter's. This is Dr. Hale from Riverside Medical Center. Are you a family member of Lena Turner? The world tilted. Yes, I said, gripping the porch railing. I'm her father. Why do you have her phone? There was a pause, careful and heavy. Mr. Turner, I'm very sorry. Your daughter is in our intensive care unit. She has advanced cancer. Her condition is critical. The words landed one by one, each heavier than the last. Cancer. Critical. That's impossible, I whispered. I spoke to her 3 months ago. Patients sometimes keep diagnoses private. The doctor said gently. She's been here for several weeks. She's been asking for you. The neglected house. The quiet. The exhaustion in her voice. Where's her husband? I demanded. Where are my grandchildren? I can't discuss other family matters, he replied. But I strongly suggest you come immediately. He gave me the address. The keepsake box slipped from my hands and hit the porch with a hollow crack. I flagged down a taxi with shaking arms, my mind screaming one question over and over. How did I miss this? As the car sped toward the hospital, one truth settled cold and sharp in my chest. Whatever I was about to walk into, I would not walk out the same man. And if someone had abandoned my daughter in her darkest hour, they were about to discover exactly how expensive that decision would be. The taxi cut through traffic with more urgency than skill, horns flaring, brakes squealing. The city blurring past the windows as if Los Angeles itself had decided to speed up just to keep me from thinking too hard. But thought was unavoidable. Every second of that ride replayed moments I had dismissed. Lena's shorter calls, the way she laughed less, how she always said she had to go just when I suggested a visit. I had mistaken distance for independence. I had confused silence with strength. The hospital rose ahead of us, all glass and steel, glowing against the early evening sky. I paid the driver without counting the bills and rushed inside, the automatic doors sliding open with a softness that felt obscenely calm for a place that housed so much grief. At the reception desk, I managed to say her name. ICU, the nurse replied after checking her screen, already standing. 7th floor. The elevator ride felt endless. Each passing floor number clicked like a countdown I didn't want to reach. When the doors finally opened, the smell hit me first. Sterile, sharp, unmistakably hospital. Machines hummed. Shoes squeaked. Voices dropped instinctively to whispers. Dr. Hale was waiting, hands folded, expression practiced, but kind. Mr. Turner, he said, I'm glad you made it. How is she? I asked, afraid of the answer. Stable for now, he replied carefully, but very weak. The treatments have been aggressive. He led me down the corridor. We passed rooms filled with quiet battles. Families holding hands, nurses adjusting for lines, lives balanced on numbers displayed on monitors. Then he stopped. Room 714. Nothing prepared me. Lena lay in the bed like a fragile echo of herself. Her face was thinner, skin pale against the white sheets, dark hair pulled back loosely. Tubes ran from her arms. A monitor traced her heartbeat in steady green lines that I fixated on as if willing them to keep going. When her eyes opened and found mine, everything inside me broke and reassembled at once. Dad, she whispered. I crossed the room in seconds, careful but desperate, taking her hand. It felt so small in mine. I'm here, I said, my voice cracking. I'm right here. She smiled, a real smile, tired but radiant. You came. I always would have, I said, though the words felt inadequate. I didn't want to scare you, she said quietly. You were still after Mom. I thought I could manage. You shouldn't have had to, I replied, brushing hair back from her forehead the way I used to when she was little. She looked away. I thought I had more time. I sat with her as long as she stayed awake, listening as she spoke in pieces. About the diagnosis, about trying to keep life normal for Sophie and Noah, about pretending the exhaustion was just stress. When she slept again, I stayed, watching the rise and fall of her chest, counting breaths like a ritual. Eventually, One question forced its way to the surface. Where's Marcus? I asked. Her expression tightened. He said he had work commitments. Important ones. When did you last see him? 3 days ago, she admitted, shame flickering in her eyes. He's been distant. Distant? I squeezed her hand. Rest, I said. We'll talk later. When she drifted off again, I reached for my phone. I called Marcus. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I left a message this time, my tone controlled but firm. This is Caleb Turner. Your wife is in intensive care. You need to call me immediately. No response. I noticed Lena's phone charging on the bedside table. I hesitated, then picked it up. The screen lit instantly, no passcode. She never locked it. A notification caught my eye. Marcus had posted a story. Against my better judgment, I tapped it. The first image froze my blood. A yacht. White, gleaming, sunlit. Champagne flutes raised in celebration. I swiped. Marcus, grinning. Arms slung around another man. Ocean stretching endlessly behind them. Another swipe. A video. Laughter. Music. Marcus facing the camera. Nothing like getting away to reset, he said cheerfully. The timestamp read, 2 hours ago. I took screenshots. Every story. Every frame. My hands were shaking now, but my mind felt eerily clear. Yacht rentals weren't cheap. Neither were the designer sunglasses on his face, the luxury watch on his wrist. I opened my banking app. The account I'd set up 2 years earlier, temporary access. Marcus had called it, for emergencies, for the kids, for Lena's peace of mind. The transaction list loaded slowly, one line at a time. Marina Harbor Yacht Charter, $14,800. Luxury auto lease, $2,300. High-end dining, $1,200. Designer retail, $3,450. My money, every dollar, while my daughter fought for her life. The engineer in me took over. Screenshots, dates, patterns, calm analysis replacing raw fury. This wasn't negligence. It was theft. I left Lena's room quietly and found a secluded bench near the hospital chapel. I dialed my bank's emergency line. Within minutes, I had revoked every ounce of Marcus's access. Accounts frozen. Cards canceled. Automatic payments terminated. Funds transferred back under my sole control. When the confirmation emails began rolling in, I felt no joy, only resolve. My phone rang. Marcus. I answered. What did you do? He shouted. My cards are dead. I'm in the middle of something important. Your wife is dying, I said flatly. Silence. Then anger. You had no right. You used my money to abandon her. I replied. That was your mistake. He tried. Threats next. Custody. Lawyers. Reputation. That was when I walked back into Lena's room, held her hand, and let her hear him expose himself. I know exactly who you are now, I said quietly into the phone. And so does she. When I hung up and blocked his number, Lena was crying not from fear, but relief. I was so tired of pretending, she whispered. You don't have to anymore, I said. I'm here, and he's done. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside that room, something had shifted forever. Marcus thought he was losing access to money. What he was really losing was control. The night stretched on inside the hospital in a way time never does anywhere else. Elastic, heavy, measured by beeps and footsteps instead of minutes. I sat beside Lena's bed long after the lights dimmed, watching the monitors trace her life in thin green lines. Every sound felt amplified. The softness of oxygen, the distant murmur of nurses changing shifts, the occasional call over the intercom. Outside the window, the city glowed, oblivious. Lena slept more peacefully than she had when I first arrived. Whatever fear had been knotting her chest seemed to have loosened, if only slightly. Knowing she wasn't alone any more mattered. Knowing the truth about Marcus mattered even more. I stayed awake, replaying the call in my head. The way his voice shifted from arrogance to panic. The threats he'd thrown out when he realized the money was gone. Men like him only respected leverage, and the moment it disappeared, so did the mask. Around midnight, a nurse stepped in quietly to check vitals. She smiled at me, the kind of smile reserved for family members who don't leave. "You can rest in the family lounge if you want," she whispered. "I'm fine here," I said. She nodded, understanding, and left us alone again. Sometime after 2 a.m., Lena stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, finding me instantly, just like before. "Dad," she murmured, "you're still here." "Always," I said. "Try to sleep." She hesitated, then said softly, "He called me yesterday. Marcus, from the marina." I felt my jaw tighten. What did he say? That he needed space, that he was overwhelmed, that I shouldn't expect him to sit in a hospital all day. Her voice was flat, like she'd already drained emotion out of the memory. I told him I was scared. He said fear was contagious. I swallowed hard. "You didn't deserve that." "I know," she said quietly. "I just didn't want to admit it." She closed her eyes again, exhausted by the confession, and I stayed still, letting her rest. Inside me, something hardened, not rage this time, but certainty. Marcus wouldn't get another chance to wound her, financially or emotionally. Morning arrived slowly, gray light seeping through the window. Dr. Hale returned with the latest update. The treatment was holding, but the road ahead would be long and uncertain. He spoke plainly, without false hope or unnecessary cruelty. "She's fighting," he said. "That counts for a lot." After he left, I stepped out to make a few calls. First, to my attorney back home, someone I trusted, someone meticulous. I didn't explain everything yet. I just asked him to be ready. Next, I called Sophie's school. Then Noah's daycare. I needed to understand who was picking them up, who had authority, who had been listed as emergency contact. Piece by piece, I mapped the gaps Marcus had left behind. By noon, my phone buzzed with a new number. Marcus again. I didn't answer. A minute later, a text arrived. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We can talk like adults." I stared at the words, then turned the phone face down. He didn't get to dictate terms anymore. When I returned to Lena's room, she was awake, staring out the window. "Dad," she said slowly, "what happens next?" I pulled the chair closer. "Next, you focus on getting stronger. I'll handle everything else." Her eyes filled. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," I said firmly. "You are my daughter." That seemed to settle something in her. She nodded and squeezed my hand. That afternoon, Marcus finally showed up. I heard him before I saw him. His voice sharp and irritated at the nurse's station, demanding access. I stood slowly, stepped into the hallway, and met him halfway. He looked different without the ocean backdrop and filtered sunlight. Pale, disheveled, angry. "You can't do this," he hissed. "You froze my accounts. I'm stranded." "You stranded yourself," I replied calmly. "Lower your voice." He scoffed. "You think you won something? She's my wife." "You abandoned her," I said. Words matter. A nurse approached, cautious but firm. "Sir, you need to calm down or leave." Marcus glared at me. "We're not finished." "We are," I said. "You're not going in there." He tried to argue. The nurse didn't budge. Security appeared. The moment passed quickly, efficiently. He was escorted away, his protests echoing down the corridor until the doors closed behind him. When I went back into Lena's room, she looked at me with wide eyes. "I heard him," she said. "I know," I replied. "It's over." She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for months. That evening, I sat alone in the family lounge and allowed myself one quiet moment of reflection. This wasn't how I'd imagined seeing my daughter again. But I was here now, present, involved, protective in a way I hadn't been since she was a child scraping her knee on the driveway. I opened my notebook and began outlining next steps. Legal protections, financial safeguards, custody contingencies. Every problem had a solution if you broke it down far enough. Marcus had thought the worst thing that could happen was losing access to money. He was wrong. The worst thing for him was losing the illusion that no one would stop him. Back in room 714, Lena slept soundly, her breathing steady, her hand curled loosely around mine. For the first time since landing in the city, I felt something close to calm. Whatever came next, I wouldn't face it reacting. I would face it prepared. The days that followed blur together in that strange hospital rhythm where clocks lose meaning and everything is measured in test results, medication schedules, and the subtle changes in a loved one's face. I slept in a stiff chair beside Lena's bed, waking at every beep of the monitor, every rustle of sheets. Exhaustion settled into my bones, but I welcomed it. It meant I was where I should have been all along. Lena grew a little stronger each day. Not dramatically, not miraculously, but enough that hope stopped feeling foolish. She could sit up longer. She could eat a few bites without nausea. She smiled more, especially when Sophie and Noah called on video, their faces filling the screen with innocent chaos. "Grandpa!" Noah shouted one afternoon, pressing his face so close to the camera it distorted. "Mom says you're fighting the bad guys." Lena laughed softly, something like that. After the call ended, she looked at me seriously. "You didn't have to do all this." "I know," I said. "That's why it matters." Meanwhile, Marcus didn't disappear quietly. He shifted tactics. When intimidation failed, he tried charm. When charm failed, he tried pity. He left voicemails on Lena's phone, his voice syrupy and remorseful. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle this. "I'm sorry." Then the tone changed. "You wouldn't even be alive without me working so hard." Then anger crept back in. "Your father poisoned you against me." Lena listened to one message, then handed me the phone. "I'm done," she said simply. I saved every voicemail. On the fourth day, my attorney called back. We spoke in low voices in a quiet corner of the cafeteria. "He's on thin ice." My attorney said after I explained the situation: financial misuse, abandonment during medical crisis, threats. If he pushes for custody or assets, this won't go the way he thinks. "Good," I replied, "because I'm not interested in playing defense." That afternoon, a social worker came to speak with Lena about support systems, care plans, contingencies. Marcus's name came up once. "He's not involved," Lena said calmly. "My father is." The social worker nodded and wrote it down. A small action, a permanent record. The next morning, Marcus tried again, this time through me. He cornered me near the elevators, his expression tight, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "We need to talk," he said, privately. "We're talking," I replied, not slowing. "You're destroying my life," he hissed. "No," I said evenly. "I'm ending your access to mine." He stepped closer. "You think you're some kind of hero? You don't understand how things work here. Lawyers, courts, image." I stopped and turned to him fully for the first time. "I understand systems," I said, "and I understand leverage. You have neither." For a moment, I thought he might explode. Instead, his shoulders sagged. "I made mistakes," he said quietly, "but I'm still their father." "Then act like it," I replied. "Start by leaving." Security appeared again, as if summoned by the tension itself. Marcus backed away, eyes burning, and disappeared down the hall. That was the last time I saw him in the hospital. The following week brought a breakthrough. Lena responded unexpectedly well to a revised treatment protocol. Dr. Hale allowed himself a cautious smile. "It's too early to celebrate," he said, "but this is progress." I saw the hope flicker in Lena's eyes, fragile but real. "I want to go home," she said that night. "We will," I promised, "but not that house." We began planning quietly. A temporary place closer to the hospital. Support for the kids. Legal steps to formalize separation. I handled paperwork while Lena focused on healing. Marcus, meanwhile, unraveled. I heard about it secondhand from a mutual acquaintance who called me hesitantly. "He's telling people you stole from him," the man said, "that you manipulated the situation." I laughed softly. "Of course he is." "Do you want to correct him?" "No," I said. "The truth doesn't need help." 2 days later, The yacht company filed a formal complaint. Without valid payment methods, Marcus had been forced off the boat in front of his friends. The photos disappeared from his social media. His accounts went silent. When Lena heard, she closed her eyes and exhaled. I hate. That part of me feels relieved. You're allowed to feel relief, I said. It means the pressure is gone. Weeks passed. Lena was moved out of ICU and into a recovery ward. Color returned slowly to her cheeks. Her laughter grew stronger. One afternoon, she asked me to bring the wooden keepsake box from my bag. I want to see it, she said. I placed it gently in her hands. She opened it and smiled through tears. Mom would love this. She would. I agreed. When Sophie and Noah visited for the first time, carefully and briefly, Lena cried openly. The kids hugged her gently, sensing the fragility without fully understanding it. Daddy's not here, Sophie whispered once, confused. Lena held her close. Grandpa is... That seemed to be enough. By the time Lena was discharged, Marcus had formally moved out. His lawyer sent a letter. Thinly veiled demands, veiled threats. My attorney responded with evidence. The tone shifted immediately. Silence followed. We returned to my home in Colorado weeks later, not as an escape, but as a reset. Fresh air, familiar skies, a place where healing didn't feel like a temporary truce. Lena rested on the porch one evening, wrapped in a blanket, watching her children chase fireflies. I thought standing up would break everything, she said quietly. Sometimes, I replied, it's the only thing that holds it together. She reached for my hand. Thank you for coming when you did. I looked out at the darkening sky, thinking of the plane ticket, the surprise visit, the empty house, the phone call that shattered everything. I almost didn't, I admitted, and that's something I'll never forget. We sat there as the night settled in, no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring, only aware that we'd face it together, eyes open, unafraid to act when silence was no longer an option. And far away, a man who thought money could buy immunity was learning a very different lesson. Life after the hospital didn't unfold with fireworks or dramatic reversals. It arrived quietly, one careful step at a time, like learning how to walk again on unfamiliar ground. Back in Westfield, Lena slept long hours, her body reclaiming strength in increments so small they were almost invisible unless you watched closely. I watched everything. The way her color improved after a good meal, the steadiness returning to her hands, the subtle confidence in her voice when she spoke to children about schoolwork or bedtime routines. Sophie and Noah adapted faster than any adult ever could. Children always do when the chaos finally stops. Their laughter returned to full volume within days. They accepted the new house, the new rhythms, the absence of their father, with a resilience that both amazed and broke my heart. When Noah asked once, "Is Daddy still busy?" Lena answered calmly, "Daddy made choices that mean he can't be here right now." No venom, no lies, just truth, shaped gently enough for a child to carry. I handled the rest. Each morning, after helping with breakfast and school drop-offs, I retreated to the small office at the back of the house. That room became my command center. Files spread across the desk. Legal correspondence neatly stacked. Financial statements printed and highlighted. Marcus's actions weren't just personal failures. They were patterns, and patterns always left trails. My attorney worked efficiently. Requests for temporary custody arrangements. Emergency protective clauses. Documentation of financial misuse. Hospital records showing abandonment. Screenshots of yacht photos with timestamps that aligned perfectly with Lena's treatment schedule. Every piece alone might have seemed circumstantial. Together, they told a story no judge would ignore. Marcus, predictably, tried to regain footing. First came emails filled with forced humility. I want to be involved again. I miss my kids. Then came manipulation. Lena wouldn't even be alive without the stress I endured to try to provide. When that didn't work, he shifted to aggression. His lawyer filed a motion alleging financial coercion and interference with marital assets. I read it once, slowly, then handed it to my attorney. Proceed, I said. The response was devastatingly simple. Evidence, dates, receipts. witness statements, bank authorization logs, the yacht company's complaint, a timeline that showed Marcus's spending increasing precisely as Lena's condition worsened. No commentary, no emotion, just facts arranged with ruthless clarity. Within 48 hours, his lawyer requested a postponement. Within a week, the tone of communication changed entirely. Meanwhile, Lena focused on living. She began walking the neighborhood again, slowly at first, leaning on my arm, then confidently on her own. The crisp mountain air seemed to strengthen her lungs. She cooked when she felt up to it, rediscovering the joy of familiar recipes. Eleanor's cornbread became a weekly ritual, the smell filling the house with something like continuity. One afternoon, as we folded laundry together, Lena looked up suddenly and said, "I didn't realize how small my life had become." I paused. "What do you mean?" "I was always bracing," she said, "for his moods, his disappointment, his absence. I thought that was normal. That marriage meant shrinking, so someone else could stand taller." I shook my head gently. "Partnership means standing side by side." She nodded. "I know that now." The first court hearing arrived in early autumn. I sat beside Lena, not in front of her, not behind her. With her. Marcus appeared on the opposite side of the room. Thinner than before, suit rumpled, confidence frayed at the edges. He avoided eye contact. When the judge asked about his absence during Lena's hospitalization, he tried deflection, work obligations, stress, fear. Then the screenshots were introduced. Silence followed. The judge's voice was calm, but firm. "You were aware your wife was receiving critical care?" "Yes." "And you chose to leave the state?" "Yes." "To engage in recreational activity funded by your father-in-law's accounts?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. "That will be all," the judge said. Temporary custody was awarded to Lena. Financial access was formally revoked. A restraining clause limited Marcus's contact to supervised visitation, pending further evaluation. Outside the courthouse, Lena exhaled like she'd been underwater for years. "I didn't think I'd survive that," she said. "You did," I replied, "and you will again." Marcus didn't speak to us as he left. He walked past, jaw clenched, eyes hollow. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. The months that followed were quieter. Marcus complied with court orders, if only because he had no leverage left. His social circle evaporated. Without money or charm to prop him up, there was little left to admire. I heard rumors, missed rent, borrowed couches, bridges burned, but I didn't seek confirmation. His life was no longer my concern. Lena's recovery accelerated. By winter, her doctors used a word I hadn't dared to hope for: remission. Not certainty, not permanence, but possibility. We celebrated with hot chocolate and a snowball fight in the backyard. Sophie laughed until she fell over. Noah declared it the best winter ever. That night, Lena sat across from me at the kitchen table, eyes shining. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "So am I said. "But fear doesn't get to decide everything." She smiled. "I think I finally understand what you did for me." "I didn't save you," I replied. "I stood beside you while you saved yourself." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, and for the first time since Eleanor passed, the ache in my chest softened into something warm and steady. Outside, snow fell gently, covering the ground in white, clean, unmarked, full of promise. Marcus had thought control came from money and intimidation. He was wrong. Control came from clarity. And clarity, once found, couldn't be taken away. Winter settled fully over Westfield, not harsh or punishing, but steady, snowfall that softened edges instead of burying them. By then, our household had found a rhythm that no longer felt temporary. Mornings began with school lunches and quiet music. Afternoons belonged to homework and short walks. Evenings ended with stories, sometimes laughter, sometimes silence that felt safe instead of heavy. Lena's strength returned unevenly. Some days she woke up energized, eager to reclaim pieces of her old life. Other days, fatigue wrapped around her without warning, reminding us that recovery wasn't a straight line. I learned not to rush her on the good days or panic on the hard ones. Healing, like engineering, followed its own logic. Pressure applied to early cause failure later. One afternoon, while Sophie worked on a school project at the dining table, Lena stood by the window watching snow drift down. "I keep thinking about how close I came to disappearing," she said quietly. I didn't answer right away. "I wasn't just sick," she continued. "I was invisible, even before the diagnosis." That was the truth she was only now allowing herself to say. Marcus hadn't taken her voice all at once. He'd eroded it slowly. Every dismissal, every joke disguised as criticism, every moment she convinced herself not to argue because it wasn't worth the tension. Illness had only exposed what was already there. "I thought being patient made me strong," she said, "but it just made me quiet." I turned to face her. Strength isn't silence. It's knowing when silence stops protecting you. She nodded, absorbing it like something she wished she'd learned earlier. Marcus resurfaced again in early January. Not loudly, not dramatically, but through lawyers. This time, the request was visitation. Supervised, limited, framed as concern for the children's emotional well-being. Lena read the paperwork twice, then handed it back to me with steady hands. "I don't want them used as leverage," she said, "but I don't want to punish them either." "We won't," I replied. "We'll protect them." The court-approved visitation center was neutral and sterile, designed to observe behavior without provocation. Marcus arrived late the first time, wearing forced enthusiasm like a costume that didn't fit. Sophie hugged him politely. Noah stayed close to Lena. Afterward, Sophie asked, "Why does Daddy feel like a stranger?" Lena crouched in front of her. "Because sometimes people forget how to be present. That's not your fault." Marcus's visits grew less frequent after that. When charm didn't work, interest faded. The children noticed, but they adjusted. Because children always do when the truth is consistent. Meanwhile, Lena began talking about work again. Tentatively at first. Design projects she could take remotely. Hours she could control. Purpose without pressure. "You don't have to prove anything," I reminded her. "I know," she said, "but I want to choose, not hide." That was the difference. Spring arrived quietly. Snow melted into soft earth. Crocuses pushed through the soil like small declarations of intent. Lena's hair had grown back enough that she no longer wore scarves. Her laugh came easier now, fuller. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, she stopped and looked at me. "Dad, what if you hadn't come?" The question wasn't accusatory. It was reflective. I leaned against the counter. "I think about that too." She swallowed. "I don't know if I'd still be here." That truth landed between us. Heavy but honest. "But you are," I said, "and you're not alone." She stepped forward and hugged me. Not fragile, not desperate, but grounded. Adult to adult. Equal. Later that night, I sat alone on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. I thought about how close I'd come to missing everything. How grief had almost turned into distance. How silence had nearly cost us years we didn't have to lose. Marcus had believed that abandoning responsibility would free him. Instead, it had stripped him bare. Lena had believed endurance was loyalty. Instead, it had nearly erased her. And I had believed love meant stepping back when your child was grown. I was wrong. Love sometimes meant stepping in decisively, unapologetically, without waiting for permission. Inside the house, I heard Lena laughing with the kids. Real laughter, the kind that doesn't flinch afterward. That sound told me everything I needed to know. Whatever came next, setbacks, court dates, fear, we would face it awake this time. And no one would ever mistake our silence for weakness again. By the time summer returned to Westfield, it felt earned. Not the flashy, postcard kind of summer, but the quiet one that settles into routines and lets you breathe without bracing for impact. The kind that doesn't demand celebration, only presence. Lena had been in remission for 3 months. Not cured, not finished, but standing on the other side of the cliff she'd almost fallen from. Her doctors were cautiously optimistic, and that caution shaped everything we did. We planned, but we didn't rush. We hoped, but we didn't tempt fate. Each day was treated like something valuable instead of something guaranteed. The children thrived in ways that were impossible to ignore. Sophie grew taller almost overnight, her confidence blooming now that the tension she'd absorbed for years had evaporated. She talked more, asked sharper questions, drew pictures of families that didn't look like cages anymore. Noah became louder, bolder. He ran faster, laughed harder, slept better. He stopped waking up at night asking if Mom was still breathing. Those changes alone told me everything I needed to know about how deeply Marcus's absence, his emotional absence long before the physical one, had affected them. Lena noticed it too. One evening, as we sat on the back steps watching the kids chase fireflies, she said quietly, "They're lighter." "Yes," I said. "So are you." She nodded. I didn't realize how much of myself I was spending just keeping things calm. Marcus tried once more to insert himself into that calm. This time, it wasn't through lawyers or visitation requests. It was through guilt. He sent Lena a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a text, a letter, as if slowing the process would make the words feel heavier, more sincere. She brought it to me unopened. "I don't know if I should read it," she said. "You don't owe him an audience," I replied. She thought about that, then opened it anyway, not with hope, but with curiosity. She read it silently. I watched her face carefully, ready to step in if I saw the familiar tightening, the old self-blame creeping back in. But it didn't. When she finished, she exhaled and folded the paper neatly. "What did he say?" I asked. "That he's changed," she replied flatly. "That losing everything made him realize what matters. That he wants another chance. That he forgives me." I blinked. "He forgives you?" She gave a humorless laugh. "Apparently." "What do you feel?" She considered that carefully. "Nothing. And that scares me less than I thought it would." She placed the letter on the table and slid it into a drawer, without ceremony. That was the moment I knew something fundamental had shifted. Marcus no longer lived rent-free in her mind. He existed as a fact, not a force. The legal process crawled forward with predictable slowness. Divorce proceedings, asset division, custody arrangements that reflected reality instead of fantasy. Marcus's demands shrank with every filing. His posture softened, his confidence dulled. Men like him mistake power for permanence. They forget that power only exists as long as others agree to play along. Lena returned to work part-time in late July, choosing projects carefully, refusing deadlines that ignored her limits. The first paycheck wasn't large, but it mattered more than any she'd earned before, because it was hers, earned freely, without apology. She framed it and hung it in her room for a week before depositing it. "I just wanted to remember what this felt like," she said. Meanwhile, I began stepping back, not emotionally, not supportively, but practically. Lena needed to know she could stand on her own without feeling abandoned. That balance mattered more than anything. So I stopped managing everything automatically. I asked before helping. I waited before fixing. I let silence exist without rushing to fill it. It was harder than it sounds. Parents who step in too late often overcorrect by never stepping back. I refused to make that mistake. One afternoon, Lena sat across from me at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. "I want to move," she said. My heart stuttered, but I didn't interrupt. "Not far," she continued. "Still in town. But I want a place that's mine. Not a refuge. A home." I nodded slowly. "That makes sense." "You don't sound disappointed," she said, searching my face. "I sound proud," I replied. Her eyes filled, not with fear, but gratitude. The kids were involved in the process. They visited houses. They argued about bedrooms. They imagined where furniture would go. For them, it wasn't a loss. It was an adventure. Marcus objected. Of course. Claimed instability. Claimed alienation. Claimed concern. The court disagreed. Lena got the keys to a modest house with a sunlit kitchen and a backyard big enough for chaos. On move-in day, we worked side by side, laughing when shelves went up crooked, ordering takeout when we got tired. That night, after the kids were asleep, Lena stood in the doorway of her new bedroom and looked around slowly. I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again, she said. You didn't lose the ability, I replied. You just lost the environment. She hugged me then, not tightly, not desperately, steadily. The kind of hug that says thank you without words. Marcus missed his next 2 scheduled visitations. Didn't call, didn't explain. The children noticed, but it hurt less this time. Disappointment fades faster when it's expected. I think Daddy's busy again, Noah said once. Lena knelt beside him. Sometimes people choose distance. That's about them, not you. He nodded, accepting the truth in the simple way only children can. Late that summer, Lena had her first clean scan since remission. We didn't throw a party. We didn't announce it to the world. We went for ice cream. Just the 4 of us, sitting on a curb, sticky fingers and quiet smiles, letting normality feel extraordinary. As the sun dipped low, Lena looked at me and said, I don't feel like I survived something anymore. What do you feel like? Like I started something. That was the real victory. Not the downfall of a man who'd failed her, not the exposure of cruelty, but the creation of a life that didn't require endurance to exist. As autumn approached, Marcus faded further into the background. His letters stopped. His lawyer stopped posturing. His name came up less often, until weeks passed without it being spoken at all. That silence didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like resolution. One evening, after helping Sophie with homework, Lena sat beside me on the porch and asked, Do you regret anything? I thought carefully before answering. I regret the moments I mistook quiet for peace, I said, but not what came after. She nodded. Me too. We sat there as the sky darkened, cicadas humming, the world steady and unthreatening. Marcus had once believed that money insulated him from consequences. He'd been wrong. But more importantly, Lena had once believed love meant enduring harm. She knew better now. And that knowledge, earned not given, was something no one could ever take from her again. Autumn didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in gradually. Cooler mornings, longer shadows, the smell of dry leaves in the air. Lena's new house settled into itself the same way. Not perfect, not polished, but undeniably hers. The children adapted faster than expected. Sophie took ownership of her room immediately, lining her books along the window ledge and taping drawings to the wall without asking permission. Noah claimed the backyard like a kingdom, mapping imaginary borders with sticks and stones. Their laughter returned in layers, first cautious, then careless, then loud. Lena watched them constantly, as if afraid the peace might evaporate as she looked away. It feels fragile, she admitted one evening as we sat at the kitchen counter, tea steaming between us. Like if I breathe too hard, something will break. That's not fragility, I said. That's awareness. She nodded slowly. I don't want to sleepwalk anymore. And she didn't. She paid attention to her body, to her energy, to her emotions. When fatigue crept in, she rested without guilt. When anger surfaced, she examined it instead of swallowing it. Therapy became part of her routine, not as a sign of damage, but as maintenance. She described it once as learning my own language again. Marcus, on the other hand, continued his slow disappearance. By late September, his missed visitations had become routine. The court recorded them dispassionately. Lena stopped marking them on the calendar. The kids stopped asking. What surprised me most wasn't his absence. It was how little power it held once acknowledged. The house filled with small milestones. Lena completed her first full month of steady work without a health setback. Sophie brought home a report card with notes about her leadership skills. Noah learned to ride his bike without training wheels, wobbling down the driveway, while Lena ran behind him, laughing breathlessly. I watched from the porch, heart full in a way I hadn't experienced since Eleanor was alive. One afternoon, as Lena and I sorted through old boxes left over from move, she froze mid-motion. This was his, she said, holding up an object I hadn't noticed before. A framed photo. Marcus, smiling broadly, arm around Lena at some long-forgotten event. She stared at it for a long moment. I don't hate him, she said quietly. I just don't recognize myself in this picture. She set the frame down and didn't put it back in the box. Later that week, the divorce hearing concluded. It wasn't dramatic. No raised voices. No shocking revelations. Just paperwork, testimony, and the quiet finality of a judge signing documents that closed a chapter neither of us had believed would end this way. Marcus didn't look at Lena. When it was over, he left without a word. In the car afterward, Lena sat silently, staring out the window. "How do you feel?" I asked. She considered it. Lighter and sad, but not confused. "That's honest," I said. She nodded. "I think that's enough." Winter preparations began earlier that year. Lena wanted to be ready. She stocked firewood, had the furnace checked, bought heavier blankets, prepared not out of fear, but intention. One night in October, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Wind rattled the windows. Rain lashed the yard. The power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Noah panicked. Lena knelt in front of him calmly. "It's okay. We're safe." She lit candles, told stories, turned the storm into an adventure. When the lights came back on hours later, Sophie said, "That was kind of fun." Lena laughed. "See? We can handle more than we think." After the kids went to bed, Lena sat beside me on the couch, candlelight still flickering. "I used to think strength meant not needing anyone," she said. "And now I think it means choosing who gets close." That was a lesson Eleanor would have been proud of. As winter approached, Lena's medical checkups continued to show stability. Each appointment carried anxiety, but it no longer ruled her. Fear existed, but it wasn't in charge. She told me once, "I don't feel like I'm waiting for bad news anymore. I'm living." Marcus resurfaced once, briefly. Through a message forwarded by his lawyer, he requested expanded visitation, citing personal growth and hardship. Lena read it, then shook her head. "Not yet," she said, "and maybe not ever." Her lawyer supported the decision. The record spoke for itself. The children barely reacted. That, more than anything, marked a real shift. Marcus was no longer central to their emotional universe. He had become peripheral. Thanksgiving arrived quietly. We hosted no one. We cooked together. The kids helped. There was laughter, mess, and gratitude that didn't feel performative. Lena raised her glass and said, "To new traditions." We echoed it. That night, after dishes were done and the house had settled, Lena sat across from me and asked, "Do you ever feel angry at him?" I didn't answer immediately. "Yes," I said finally, "but not in a way that controls me." She smiled. "That's how I want to feel." "You will," I said. "Anger fades when it's no longer protecting you." December brought snow and memories. The first snowfall reminded Lena of last year, of hospital lights, of fear. She grew quiet for a few days, introspective. Then, without announcement, she did something unexpected. She decorated, not extravagantly, not performatively, but intentionally. Lights along the porch, a small tree, ornaments the kids made by hand. She invited joy back in, carefully, like a guest who'd been gone a long time. On Christmas Eve, we sat together in the living room, sipping cocoa. No tension, no dread, just peace. Lena caught my eye and smiled. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this calm again," she said. "You didn't lose the capacity." I replied, "You lost the conditions." She leaned back, content. Outside, snow fell softly, covering the ground in white. Inside, the house glowed warm and steady. Marcus didn't call. The absence didn't hurt. It confirmed something Lena already knew. As the year drew to a close, Lena began talking about the future. Not in vague hopes, but concrete plans. Trips she wanted to take with the kids. Projects she wanted to build. A life she was no longer postponing. One evening, she asked me, "What will you do when you go home?" I paused. "I'll visit," I said. "Often, but I'll also live my own life." She nodded. "That feels right." We had learned the same lesson from opposite directions. Closeness didn't require sacrifice of self. Support didn't require erasure. As New Year's Eve approached, we stood outside together, watching fireworks bloom faintly in the distance. Sophie yawned. Noah leaned against Lena's side. "Make a wish," Sophie said. Lena closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. "I already have what I need," she said softly. I believed her. Part 8 didn't end with triumph or punishment. It ended with something quieter, more enduring. Stability. And that, earned slowly, deliberately, was the most powerful outcome of all. The new year didn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic decorations. It came quietly, the way lasting change often does. Without asking for attention, without demanding applause. January mornings were pale and cold, sunlight slipping cautiously through the windows of Lena's house, touching the walls she'd chosen herself, warming a life that finally felt intentional. I stayed through the first weeks of winter, not because I was needed in the way I once had been, but because we enjoyed the ordinary together. That distinction mattered more than either of us said out loud. Mornings began with school lunches and mismatched socks. Afternoons were filled with work calls, homework questions, and the sound of Noah practicing multiplication out loud like a challenge to the universe. Evenings settled into routines that felt earned. Simple dinners, shared chores, quiet conversations that didn't circle around fear. Lena had stopped measuring her days by what she survived. Now she measured them by what she chose. Her health remained stable. Each appointment came with nerves, but the results no longer dictated her identity. She refused to let her life shrink to test results and statistics. When anxiety surfaced, she named it. When exhaustion crept in, she rested without apology. She was learning to listen to herself with the same care she once reserved for everyone else. One afternoon, while we sorted paperwork at the kitchen table, she paused and looked up at me. "I used to think love meant tolerating pain," she said. "That if I just stayed kind enough, patient enough, things would improve. And now," I asked, "and now I know kindness without boundaries is just self-erasure." That sentence told me more about her healing than any medical chart ever could. Marcus didn't disappear completely. People like him rarely do. He surfaced once more in late January, this time not through lawyers, not through guilt, but through proximity. Lena ran into him at a grocery store. She told me about it that night. Sitting across from me at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "He looked smaller," she said. "Not physically, just diminished." "What did he say?" I asked. He asked how I was. Asked about the kids. Said he hoped we could be civil someday. And I told him we already were, she replied. Civil doesn't mean accessible. She didn't shake afterward. Didn't replay the conversation 100 times. Didn't question herself. She came home and made dinner. That was the difference. Marcus, stripped of drama and leverage, had become what he always feared, irrelevant. The children noticed, too, though in quieter ways. Sophie stopped drawing pictures that tried to bridge two households. Her families now had one center. Noah stopped asking if he needed to behave better, so Daddy would come back. Children don't need perfection. They need consistency. By February, Lena had reclaimed enough strength to take a small trip with the kids. A weekend away, nothing ambitious. She planned it meticulously, not out of fear, but confidence. I watched her load the car, checklists, manage chaos with ease. Before she left, she hugged me and said, I didn't realize how capable I was. I smiled. You always were. When they returned, sunburned and laughing, she told me something that stayed with me. I didn't think about him once, she said. That was the moment I knew the story had truly turned. Spring arrived early that year. Snow melted fast. Crocuses pushed through the ground like they were eager to prove something. The house filled with light again. Windows opened. Fresh air replaced the last traces of hospital antiseptic that still lived in my memory. Lena began mentoring other women through a local support network. Quietly, without fanfare. She never framed herself as a hero or survivor. She simply listened, shared what she'd learned, asked the questions she once avoided. One evening, she came home thoughtful. A woman asked me how to know when to leave, she said. I didn't have a perfect answer. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her that love shouldn't make you feel smaller, she replied. And that silence isn't peace if it costs you your voice. It was enough. By late spring, my time there began to feel complete. Not finished, just balanced. Lena didn't need me hovering anymore. She didn't lean on me out of fear. She invited me into her life out of choice. That was a goal all along. The night before I left, we sat on the porch together, watching the kids chase fireflies again. Older now, faster, more confident. The air was warm. The future felt open. I'm glad you came when you did, Lena said softly. So am I replied. But even if you hadn't, she continued, I think I would have found my way eventually. I smiled. I believe that. She leaned her head against my shoulder, the way she used to when she was a teenager, pretending she wasn't tired. I don't feel like I lost anything anymore, she said. I feel like I shed something that didn't belong to me. That's when I understood the full shape of what had happened. This story was never about punishment. It wasn't about taking anything from Marcus. It was about removing the illusion that endurance equals love, that suffering proves loyalty, that silence keeps families together. Sometimes the most decisive action isn't loud. It's withdrawal. It's clarity. It's choosing to stop funding your own harm, emotionally, financially, spiritually, and walking away without asking permission. When I returned home, my life didn't shrink. It expanded. I tended the garden Eleanor always loved. I returned to my workshop, carving small wooden gifts for Sophie and Noah. I volunteered at the local school, teaching practical skills to kids who needed someone patient enough to explain things twice. Lena visited often. The children filled my house with noise and mess and life. Marcus never did. Occasionally, Lena would update me, briefly, factually. He was still struggling, still blaming circumstances, still learning the wrong lessons. But she no longer carried that weight. She had learned the only lesson that mattered. You don't need to destroy someone to reclaim yourself. You just need to stop sacrificing your dignity to keep them comfortable. As I write this now, months later, I can say with certainty that the most powerful turning point in this story wasn't the confrontation, the legal victories, or the financial consequences. It was the moment Lena stopped asking for permission to live fully. That choice changed everything. And if you stayed with my story until now, maybe it's because a part of you recognizes that moment too. The quiet line between enduring and choosing, between surviving and reclaiming yourself. Before you go, do me one last favor. If my story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice helps these stories reach people who might still be standing in silence, wondering if they're allowed to step away. They are, and so are you.